You gonna put me in the same? Oh yeah. Aerosol! Hello and welcome to the Shiro Coffee Chat, where coffee, yes, indeed, coffee meets conversation. I am your host, retired Army veteran Melissa Farmer Hill, and this is the place where we table talk over breaking news, veteran story, lifestyle topics, and everything in between. So let's sip our coffee, speak our truth, and serve our military and veterans community. And if you by chance do not have your Shiro coffee, go to shirocoffeeclub.com where we keep the world caffeinated and women veterans celebrated. I dropped something there. There we go. Yes, shirocoffee.com where we keep the world caffeinated and women veterans celebrated. And there we celebrate a woman veteran on the back of every bag. And I just want to thank you. I really want to thank you for joining me. So let's get started. Our first story is really a sad story. It's a sad one. Boeing 737 carrying 175 passengers and six crew members was involved in a plane crash landing and skidded off the runway at a South Korean airport, and it hit a concrete perimeter fence and it bursted into flames. We're going to show you this footage, but before I do, I want to warn you that this is really graphic. So let's go ahead and I warn you that this footage is really graphic.
큰일이네.
Wow. I mean, even when you see that, even from that deadly plane crash to know that there were still two survivors. And in reality, this story really leaves me with more questions than answered because the investigation is ongoing and we'll see. But the ABC News reports that prior to that crash, the control tower issued a warning of possible bird strike. Now, if you don't know what bird strike is, I'm gonna tell you a little bit about it. Okay, so bird strike is when it's a collision between a bird and an aircraft, and that aircraft can be in flight, it can be in takeoff, or it can be landing. But bird strikes are really not, it's not uncommon, but it does raise significant concern about just the aviation because thousands of incidents are reported globally every year. And so the International Civil Aviation Organization said that there were two 273,343 wildlife strike reports between 2016 and 2021. So that's a little over about 45,000 plus strikes annually all across the globe. And and since we do share air with our fellow flying wildlife, I just want to know, what's being done to protect humans in the air and the birds we share the airspace with. Now, in the military, there is a saying, and that saying was, "It briefs well." And for those of you who know what that means, you know what I'm going to talk about next. So when we say it briefs well, that means it looked good on paper, but if there was a reality check done, it may or may not look the same. So we use that saying, it briefs well, to say, hey, this, it sounds good, but. So there are in fact a number of precautionary measures that are used. They're airport level. So when you're at the airport level, you have wildlife hazard management plan. So these are actual people that work in wildlife, and they come and they look at how birds migrate and the patterns and different things like that. They use audible deterrence, visual deterrence, and the radar detection system. And then there's also something that you have to think about, not only at the airlines, but also the aircraft design itself, where aircrafts are supposed to be equipped with flashing lights, or just having powerful engines that can withstand bird caucus. And I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to get in trouble with PETA, but yeah, if the engines can withstand bird caucus, yes, that does mean the bird is unalive during the course of that. And of course, none of these things are enough. When any life is lost, none of these precautions are enough. It only becomes important when something happens. I remember when I worked in the battalion S1, and this was around, I guess, the late 90s. It was around the late 90s. And we had a similar thing. Now it's nothing in comparison to what just happened, but no one cared about the paperwork until the paperwork got lost or misfiled or didn't process. Then, of course, all hell broke loose, and now everyone is concerned. And then when things like aircraft crashes happen, we have a right, I believe, to know what went wrong and expect the corporations to take more precautionary measures, and the airlines themselves. I'm not totally sold on that wildlife strike, but that's the story that's being told to us. There are just a lot of small things to me that don't add up, especially when one of the main things was that the landing wheels didn't deploy. So could that have been caused by a malfunction of the equipment? What kind of checks were made? Like, there's so many questions. But I'm waiting patiently, like you, for more information. And then don't forget that every plane has a black box, right? So maybe we'll see something happen. Maybe we can get information from the black box. I'm not sure. But I think one point I do want to make is that aviation is still it's really one of the safest modes of transportation. I know it's kind of hard with me talking, to you about a plane crash, but it still is one of the safest modes of transportation. But accidents like this kind of remind us of, why we need rigorous protocols, and us keeping our foot on the necks of the airlines and the aircraft manufacturers. It's so essential. The plane, as I understand it, it was about 15 years old, so it had at least 5 to 10. I think I read Boeing 737s. They're good for 25 years. So that aircraft still had at least 5 to 10 more years of usage. And again, this incident is still under investigation, and we'll know more about it as the case unfolds. But I just want to really encourage you to keep flying, and also keep the people whose lives were lost, and the two flight attendants who survived, in your positive thoughts and prayers. This is horrific. It's really sad. And I just want to say, rest in peace to the 179 lives that we lost on the Jeju Air Flight 2216. And let's just take a moment of silence right now to just reflect that we are still alive and to think about those who were lost today and really keep our hearts open to those two flight attendants that survived because they're going to need a lot of therapy. Remember, PTSD is real and it doesn't just happen to members of the military. So, yeah, that's it. Let's just take a moment. Thank you. So, our next story is about our mighty National Guard. And I'm just going to let Andre, who's on the ones and twos, show that clip. It's coming. It's coming. That clip is coming. I know it is.
Last Thursday, it saw 4.5 million riders, the highest number in a day since March 11th, 2020, right before the pandemic. Fast forward to March of this year when Governor Hochul deployed 750 members of the National Guard following a series of subway crimes. Hochul says since then, crime is down 10% in the transit system, and she's boosting the city's defenses, adding 250 members of the National Guard to select stations.
I've heard from many people that the presence of the National Guard has made not just a physical difference, but a psychological difference.
I saw like officers like on duty, which I was like, okay, like I'm safe here.
There's too many crazy people out here, and the more that they have down here, the better.
The first time I saw it, it sort of jolted me back a little bit, so it didn't feel that comforting.
The Riders Alliance says that to the extent that riders do want an official presence, it is to improve safety on the platforms and the trains, not at the turnstiles where the guards are currently posted.
They're checking bags, but it's like, who are they checking? Like, what's the frequency of these checks?
Critics say the move fails to address the root cause of public safety concerns, which they say is the lack of resources and treatment for those with severe mental illness.
If you were to multiply that police force by 10, you're not going to stop crimes from happening until you change the conditions that lead to crime.
Especially Black and brown New Yorkers get stopped a lot more than white New Yorkers, and we see a whole lot more ticketing for fare evasion. None of that increases people's feeling of safety on the subway.
She said the money should go to mental health crisis experts. The governor said a robust program is underway, but is limited due to state laws that need to be changed. In Columbus Circle, Lisa Rosner, CBS News, New York.
The MTA also announced every subway car now has a security camera.
All right. First of all, despite how you feel about that clip, let's give a big Army hood to our New York National Guard. Yes, hood. And for those of you who don't know, the National Guard is a state-based military force. So that falls under the command of the governor. Yes, the governor. Under most conditions. Now, there are other conditions where it falls under the president. But last year, Governor Ron DeSantis, he activated the Florida National Guard to get control over a huge influx of illegal immigrants trying to get into the U.S. off the coast of Florida from Cuba. And then this year, Washington State Governor Jay Inslee activated his National Guard for Elections Week. He thought it was going to be that bad. And as you can see it happening in real time based on the video, on December 18th, New York Governor Kathy Hochul deployed 250 more National Guard troops. Now, she first used her National Guard troops in March of this year when she deployed 750 soldiers to help bring crime down. And she is saying currently that crime is down by 10%. Now, one of the things you need to know that these National Guards in New York are part of Joint Task Force Empire Shield. And now that came from 9/11 when they were when that Joint Task Force was initially activated, I believe. Now, they do not have law enforcement responsibility. So you would think you would see the National Guard, they could do something. No, they cannot arrest anyone, but what they do serve as, they serve as a show of force to kind of deter criminals, and it makes people feel safe, as you saw on the video. And then it's an additional set of eyes that you have on your streets. So that is a good thing. Now, the only way that the National Guard can be granted more authority is under martial law, but we don't want that under any circumstances, because that's not good. I'm going to take a sip here. But I think one of the things we have to ask ourselves, what is the underlying reason for the increase in crime to need that much additional security? I mean, sure, we won't ever be like Japan, you guys. I mean, Japan has a 99% conviction rate. They have very strict regulations regarding gun possession, and murder is punishable by, guess what? By hanging. Okay, by hanging. So I think last year there were only 912 murders in the entire country in Japan, compared to our 19,252 murders in the United States. Now that's murders and non-negligent manslaughter in the US. So I want to make sure that so technically more people died, but the 19,000 is for murders and non-negligent manslaughters in the USA. And, although, the governor says that New York has decreased in subway crime, still crime exists at record levels in this country. I mean, it's almost like an infestation of a big, huge crime wave has taken over, especially in urban areas. And my personal opinion is that, the country needs to make a few tough choices, right? We need more money for resources. So do we have to rob Peter to pay Paul? Where would those resources come from? Privacy. If we have, metal detectors in subways and cameras everywhere, and I think they said there's a camera in every train, train in New York now. So on every train you have a camera inside the cart, from as I understand it. And so what happens to our privacy, And then what about harsher sentencing? This might seem humane for some, and that's why I say, we have to make some tough choices here. And unless we're going to create a nation of vigilantes, as we've seen recently, something needs to be done. But the bottom line is, let's get that out the way first. I'm glad to see an increase of National Guard presence, and I'm glad that it makes people feel safe. My questions are, but for how long? How long can they remain activated? And how long after they leave will the criminals see that as a sign to come in and start committing more crimes? I definitely believe that it's a systemic issue. I mean, that involves, like they said in the clip, mental health. We need more resources, rehabilitation for some, and stiffer laws on crime. And I don't have the answers, but I got all the questions. So tell me, what do you think? What do you think about our National Guard? What do you think about what New York is doing? And should we start activating our National Guard everywhere on a regular basis? Make them a part of the law enforcement of the state. That's all I wanted to talk about. But don't forget to go to SheRoCoffee.com and join me next week for some more Shero Coffee Chat. Thanks for watching.